Shirley.
I think I know what you're asking me.
What,
We have a
it
stand-up.
sounds as though you're trying to make the system better.
Make it work correctly, make to its potential. And I don't think it's working to its potential yet. And we're
Well,
not gonna know that, well, let's put it this way. We've gained a lot of progress to where it should work to its potential. I don't think we're 100% there yet. And quite honestly, we've only done to the, things that have been overgrown for 10, 15 years, some of the major drainage ways, very little maintenance. We really have to get really into it. This coming year, thank you to the commission, we can now maintain all the swales throughout the city, the roadside swales 6 times a year and twice a year in the centers. But the bigger things, the retention ditches along the creek, honestly, the removal of the blockages project, to drop in the bucket. But even with that drop in the bucket, we've made tremendous headway with gaining capacity in our system.
I'd like to add one more thing which can maybe help you understand why I think purchasing land and keeping it as is important. When these single-family lots are built, they bring in a lot of fill. And we don't require single-family homes to do floodplain compensation. Meaning, if you build in floodplain, bring fill because your house is elevated out of floodplain and you have that septic, that distance that you need to clear, the septic. That mound of dirt, if you were to do compensation, you have to scrape down an equivalent amount of dirt somewhere else on your property. And on single-family properties, it's just not big enough to do that. And no city, county requires that for single-family. For large commercial and large residential subdivision, yes, they have to go through that very detailed analysis. So if people keep building in this area, they're gonna keep adding more fill to floodplain, and where's the water gonna go? It's gonna go out more, right? So that's really important, in addition to what I said about water quality. Okay. Now again, large commercial and large residential subdivision, all residential subdivision has to have stormwater ponds to do treatment and to hold the water back so it doesn't flood anybody else, and also floodplain compensation if they're building in a 100-year floodplain. So with these being all single-family lots, if we keep letting them build, we're gonna get a worse and worse situation.
We're at somewhat of a disadvantage in the city of Northport because when General Development Corporation originally platted the city and built it and developed it, it wasn't, as Elizabeth mentioned, in subdivisions. It was one big subdivision. And at that time, there was no requirements, you have to have retention ponds for your stormwater drainage. You have to have flood zone compensation for flooding, things like that. So now, when we allow the buildings to be constructed in those areas, it's taking up space that we really do need to kind of have for capacity for flooding.
I'm going to go back to the FEMA maps to try and get a better understanding of the designation that FEMA has on each one of the parcels. Some of them are an X, some of them are an AE, some of them are an A. They have all these different designations, which is completely Greek to me. But looking at just picking of various parcels in the area that you have outlined, some of them are just like my house, that it's like not a 0% chance of flooding, but a very minimal chance of flooding. Mm-hmm. But yet they're in your designated areas. Maybe we, for the next time we have this conversation, have the FEMA maps showing which ones obviously along the creek are the most likely to flood and what that designation is, and then moving outwards, an overlay of showing what the FEMA map shows and what in that area that you guys are wanting to purchase these properties, so we can have a better understanding.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if
we
that
can do that.
is,
we can do that. Yes, ma'am.
Because just printing up one, 90% of it's not even in, and that lower one is not even in the floodplain. So the roads are, but the parcels aren't.
Right. remember in my second analysis, I included parcels along flooded roads.
But
Isn't there a way to use ditching or that to take the water off of the road without it going into the houses?
It depend, we want to flow water by gravity. And the gravity, it ends up in the creek. If the creek is high, you cannot get the water to flow against gravity. If the tailwater is high, it won't flow.
One of the issues that we have is, and you're absolutely right, Mayor, is there's probably, and we've minimized it dramatically, almost down to nothing, pretty much down to nothing. With Irma, we had no homes taking water. But we also had roads underwater. And you're gonna have that because it's part of your watershed. I mean, that's part of our system. Now, can we take some of those houses out or some of those properties out? Absolutely. I mean, and we're more than happy to do that, go back to the drawing board and try to minimize, rather than as Elizabeth said, even if the floodwaters touch the property, she's got it in her study area. We can exclude those, keeping in mind that you're always more than likely going to have water on the roads. You know, there's some roads we're not going to be able to take that water off of. The goal is to get it out of there within 72 hours. But we're more than happy to do that, to minimize just the more severely impacted properties that will have water on the properties, as opposed to very little or none just on the roadways. We can definitely do that.
That would be the March 4th.
so can we get a
Yes.
consensus to have staff supply the FEMA map overlay showing these various flooding designations in these areas that they have highlighted?
Yeah,
Thank you.
for the next meeting.
Yeah. I assume you're coming back with more information.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Would you like us to also identify those lots, and I'd probably be similar to the March 4th presentation, Elizabeth, you said, as far as those properties that are only impacted with the roadway, fronting the roadway, as opposed to water on them? Okay, We'll
Maybe
do
two
that.
separate maps or something?
yeah, we'll do that.
My last question I'm sorry, I have two of them. When I went back to listen to the March 4th meeting, you applied for the conceptual permit.
Yes.
Any status update on that?
Yes, I can give you an update. We are now on, when we applied, we received what they call a request for additional information. We've received two of them. We responded to the first one, then the second one came, and we've responded to the second one in October, late October. So I don't expect too many more questions after this. All the questions they've asked, we sat down with SwiftMud and went over the responses with them. The only thing they had an issue was the inflow reduction method. So in our response to the second request for additional information, we've removed that option. So I'm hoping that they'll give us a conceptual permit any day.
So now we need to talk about the maintenance of the maintenance path or maintenance road, depending on how you want to call it, along the creek. You had mentioned that you're going to do a wildlife survey
Yes.
within 90 days prior to starting
Right.
that. So 90 days, figure January, February, March. Then you're going to start the clearing in March of those debris areas?
Within that 90, it cannot be longer than 90 days. We can do the study tomorrow. Okay?
Who's going to do the study?
A consultant will. A qualified consultant will do that study. When that study clears, and we will definitely let SwiftMud know what we're doing, and then we'll start. We don't have to wait 90 days. We have to do it within that 90 days.
I understand that, okay.
So I'm hoping, usually the flow in the creek really drops dramatically in January, February, March. So it's good time to we'll get that done within that time frame.
Is that wildlife or environmental survey, is that also going to cover the plants, the rare plants, and maybe champion trees and stuff like that? Not just the
Right,
wildlife?
plants and wildlife, yes.
Okay.
Any protected species will be evaluated
Fantastic.
in the
And
area of access of those 5 more blockages.
so is what you're planning to do in 2020, in the dry season of 2020,
Yes.
is it similar to what you guys did in 17?
No.
Thank you.
In these area blockages, we're going to try to cut into the creek more perpendicular. This is the creek, we're going to try and cut in rather than doing along parallel to the creek. We're going to access it this way, so minimizing the amount of disruption. Okay?
And have you determined where you're cutting in?
Yes, our operations staff has that.
Is that something city manager can provide to us so that we can have it available to the public?
Yeah.
That are following the creek clearing closely? Do you need a consensus? And my last question, how are the grants coming along? Have we applied for any? Have we?
There's none available right now. We may be getting, we're hoping to see some in the future.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any follow-up questions, comments? All right. Seeing none, let's go through this list of things that they need direction on. Continuation of Myakkahatchee Creek block removal. I think you received that consensus the last meeting. I don't know if you need it again.
No, I believe we received it last meeting. Yes, ma'am.
Evaluate the need to acquire properties after 2 to 3 years or 2 to 3 rainy seasons.
Well, I think, some of the things that we're waiting to come back would kind of address this too.
Exactly.
So I don't know that now's the time to get most of that,
I tend to agree. That's where I was going with a lot of this. I think we need to have another meeting based on the information on the conservation land, the information about how much revenue it's, taxes that are going to be lost, how we can maybe rezone it like Commissioner Carrasone had mentioned, and those FEMA maps. So, Commissioner Carrasone?
I have one other question.
Can we, in addition to that, find out if there is a way to do swap land? As we had done with the first 2 tiers, that we swapped lands versus purchasing outright.
Okay.
And if that's possible, I would much rather see us start acquiring lands outside of the Myakkahatchee because they're not considered a priority, which may actually reduce the amount of money it costs to purchase those lands, and then in return, use those lands to swap out for that Myakkahatchee property. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because if you purchase the property, they're going to consider them waterfront property, or at least waterway property, and then that raises the value. And so if you have properties that are outside of that waterfront area, and I know, and you know, it's not waterfront, but it's a creek. But that, Venice,
It
Northport.
was my property.
Everybody,
It was my property, it
Yeah.
was waterfront. I guarantee you.
people use whatever they need to sell. But it also creates a kind of a misnomer on the value of those properties. So I'm thinking that if you go outside of that higher value property area, purchase lands so that you, with the intent to swap the lands of the higher value property, you might save money. So that's what I'm trying to get at.
Commissioner, that's a good idea, except that I think it's the reverse. Lands that are in the floodplain are much lower in value now.
I would
get
love to say
lots-
that, but I've
Lots of
seen 'em.
people call me every day, every week. I get several calls about floodplain on land. As soon as they heard that there's floodplain or wetlands, sometimes they go hand in hand, sometimes they don't. But there's a good chance, because they're the lower areas, they stay away from buying those lands. So I don't believe the property is that high when it's in the
They don't want that
floodplain.
insurance rate skyrocket.
need
And the
to go
insurance
look at-
rate, and then they have to bill higher, and then they have to,
Yeah.
worry about the flooded streets driving to their homes, so.
Go ahead, Commissioner, Vice Mayor.
I think a couple of things that have been put on the table that's gonna be coming in that 6-month mark is where the only place to go. It's giving you the next information. We're not gonna know where we're at until we're through couple 3 flood, or wet seasons. So we can't make any decision immediately. But gathering the information about rezoning, swapping, these types of things gives us the information to prep when we get through these couple rainy seasons. That's the way I'm seeing it.
All right, so do you want a consensus or anything about this land swap that Commissioner Carrison had mentioned, or is that going to?
Probably a better conversation to have on Thursday when we are doing the presentation to you all about the city-owned lots.
Oh, okay.
We're actually having that conversation with you all on Thursday, so timing's great. That we'll be able to finalize that conversation then, I believe.
Fantastic. All right. I don't think you need any other direction from us.
Thank you.
Everything's all, okay, so
Yes,
we'll
ma'am.
have
Thank
this
you.
conversation again in 4 to 6 months. Look forward to that.
Okay.
All right. It's only 10 o'clock, so let's move on to the city charter. I would assume city attorney? Is that yours or city manager?
Kind of
Everybody's?
the whole world's, this item was continued from Tuesday's meeting so that we could have some more conversation. We took your advice. We invited the charter review people, who there's at least 2 of I've seen in the audience, without turning around and counting them all.
Here.
That's up to you all.
Okay,
It's not considered a joint meeting, if that's gonna be your question.
because it's not considered a joint meeting and they are subject to sunshine, are they allowed to sit at the table and be part of the discussion even though they do not have their quorum? Okay, and be part of the conversation? I don't want to jeopardize their sunshine rules, that's why I'm asking for clarification.
This is a publicly noticed meeting, so anybody can participate.
Just making sure for their benefit, that's all.
They don't talk to each other. As long as they don't talk to each other.
As long as they don't talk to each
Whisper,
other.
whisper in
It's
each other's
already a
ear.
publicly advertised meeting, so.
I meant back there.
Yet again, it doesn't matter. It's a publicly, it's about the agenda item and the fact that we have to.
Well, we invited them to come
I
too.
just want to err on the side of caution.
Here, and as long as they're being recorded, I think that's more of a cover than keeping them out in the audience.
And again, I'm just erring on the side of caution. That's all I'm just double checking for. So at this time, if our 2 charter review advisory board members would like to join us, it's up to you. And if you could please state your name for the record, and that way then we can then proceed.
Justin Willis?
David DeVal,
You're both charter review advisory board members, correct?
I'm a member.
All right. So, I know we had a short commission, discussion on November 12th, and it was agreed to bring it back to this workshop. So the November 12th, we wanted to talk about a few different things that were priorities after the charter rewrite that were discussed with your board, and things that we had heard and discussed even as our board during the charter rewrite, where we said, that's a little bit more meat and potatoes, let's wait until a new referendum after this one passed. So I guess at this point, let's open it up for questions, comments.
Mayor, I think part of our intention too is to get a little bit of intent
Mhm.
behind the conversations that were being had.
We don't need to go one at a time.
Correct.
Over the recommendations, and then open it up to if we have any ourselves too.
So I agree. I think going one at a time instead of all over the place is the better way to go, so we can keep our focus. Let's start with this mayor versus chair title. So, anybody?
Anybody?
Just
Um,
raise your hand if you want to speak. Commissioner, sorry,
Not yet.
Mr. Willis.
I have a bigger idea on that, because I've been listening to the conversation from the public, from you guys, from the charter members. Commissioner Luke came and spoke one time, giving a little bit of her opinion on some of what was happening there. It seems like there is an issue between the mayor versus chair and it not being elected. In all honesty, I'd rather see you leave the title of mayor and make it an elected position with a 2-year term. A total of 4 2-year terms can be served as the chair of the board. It would still be a weak mayor. We would keep the city manager. They would work together. But when we beat up on the mayor, at least we elected them. When we beat up on the chair, at least we elected them. And now, instead of it being elected by you guys, we the people have made the decision, this is the person we want to chair the meeting. Your vice mayor would still be appointed by the chair, but the mayor itself would be elected by us. It would be a weak, kind of like a weak mayor, in the sense of the only additional ability is they would hold the emergency meeting and delegation that we gave to the city manager recently. That would fall on the mayor instead of the city manager at that time, and the two of them would have to work together. It seems like that's what everybody's looking for throughout the conversations, and I don't want to see us get rid of the term mayor and lose the ability of some of the things that we can do. I've asked for backup materials of reasons of why we did this, but we never got those. If it doesn't come from our chair, unfortunately, the other board members can't request things, only the chair can, so we don't get the backup material of why did the commission want it to be mayor? What benefit came from it? What was the reason why we did this? How much time has gone by? What changed since we initially put it in place versus today? I feel like our board has been making a lot of big decisions, but with no backup information to show us why we put it in place to begin with.
Can I?
Sorry, I gave you a comment and a.
Vice Mayor Luke, go ahead, please.
I wasn't, of course, on the commission at that point in time, but the story that I was told was we go to conventions and stuff, and there's particular sections of the conventions that mayors go to. But these mayors belong to the League of Mayors, which is about $1,500 to be able to join that, is what I was told just recently. And those mayors are elected mayors that serve a really long time. And I saw Linda Yates, when she was mayor, go to some of the dinners or breakfasts or whatever and talk with the people at the convention. And then the next year, Vanessa was mayor.
Right.
And they were still calling Linda mayor, and why aren't you here or there? So it's not just the citizens that are confused. It's confusing even, I think, to the point of the objective of doing it. Vanessa had her hand up, so before I go on to that, let her speak, and then I'll pick back up.
Commissioner Pearson.
I can wait.
Oh,
I'm good.
All right, when the flow's going the way it is, jump in.
I was here when we first started talking about it around the 2009 era, 2010. And the reason is that the League of Cities, the National League of Cities, some of the other types of organizations will recognize a mayor well before they recognize a chair. It didn't matter if that person was elected, not elected. There's several mayors that are not elected that served in all those different committees. But it was really about having that mayor title, which didn't mean anything to us, but apparently means something to all these other organizations. It allowed for us to also get a lot of communication on additional grants. It gave us a one-way ticket to having a solid conversation with our legislators who, for some reason, felt like it was more worthy for them to speak to a mayor than the chair of a board. And be it psychology, be it realistic, it doesn't matter, it did make a difference. And so while it doesn't make a difference to us, for some reason, having that title made a difference to others. And it did put us in a higher level of professionalism, not only in our county, in our state, but in the national level. And I think that it's important and imperative that we continue on.
That's my 2 cents.
Commissioner Hanks?
Commissioner.
Yeah, in the vein of what Commissioner Carrison was saying, you know, having just served as the title of mayor, I will assure you that the majority of folks, even though they understand, even around here, that we are a weak mayor system, that it is appointed, there is something about us, wherever we came from, that we have, that we're preconditioned to certain things. That's more of the subconscious aspect to it. And I will tell you, well, one, whenever you say commissioner, people don't really understand that either. They want to know
Right.
what you're a commissioner of.
Exactly,
Because
it's the
typically
wrong
in this
term.
position,
It's a
we would be
council.
councilman.
Exactly, it's the wrong
You know?
term.
But that being said, they also felt the same way with mayor. And as Commissioner Carrison said, when you make a call as a commissioner or you make a call as a mayor, it is received completely differently, even though in their brains they understand it. But there is a subconscious aspect that is completely received differently. And I think it is advantageous to the city. I think it is beneficial to the citizens. I think it's beneficial to the mayor and the vice mayor, or deputy mayor, whatever you want to call all of that, to be able to utilize those titles that are preconditioned in people's minds to receive. Whenever you sit down with somebody as a commissioner, well, that's great. But when you sit down as a mayor, the whole atmosphere is different. And
You guys make very valid points. It is a thought process, a mentality that people connect with that mayor because they feel as though mayor was elected and they have somehow more power. So I get what you're saying and it's valid. Maybe it's just an educational piece where we keep the title as is, but we educate everybody more. Actually, I think part of the education would be, instead of changing the title, maybe going with what Commissioner Carrison said last year when we put Mayor Hanks in. She said it needs to go by this higher rotation. Exactly. I know previously they rotated by seats into that office. I'll just state it out loud because it was a rotation of somebody that they didn't like. They up and changed their minds and they then just appointed whoever they wanted. I think maybe if we went back to the rotation either of seniority or of seats, and I like the idea of seniority of when you're voted in. I like that, but it could be seat too. Both of them would be logical. But I think if we did that, maybe it would give the coverage where we can say, guys, our mayors rotate in. It still keeps your city manager commission form of government, but it gives the education for them to realize what the mayor hierarchy is.
Thank you. Commissioner Emmerich, did you want to weigh in on this? Okay. I'll recognize you as soon as I'm done. Having an elected mayor position as a weak mayor, I would think that they would still be a commissioner. They're elected as a commissioner.
It's, the title would be mayor. The title would,
But-
their title would be mayor. They would be a commissioner exactly the same as you, but their title would be
Okay,
mayor.
hold on. I think that the citizens already said they don't want chair, they want mayor. They voted for that.
Correct.
As the title. I'm with Commissioner Luke, it's an educational thing. Every city is different. We don't have to do everything just because other cities do things. It's an educational thing where people, this is how we do it here in the city of Northport. Once they understand it, once they learn it, whether they think it's right or wrong or indifferent, that's how we do it. To change it to a weak mayor system, as a commissioner, are they voting? There's too many things that I don't quite understand how that will work. Because if you have a former commissioner, they serve their 2 years, can they then go on and serve as a mayor?
Absolutely.
And that is where then you come into how many times can you actually serve on the board? So there's a lot of things that I would have to have a lot more information on. I like the idea of rotating the mayor and putting it in the charter that the mayor,
There.
no, it doesn't say rotate.
It was there. This is what I'm trying to say. It used to be there and they voted it out. So are we gonna go and propose putting it back in is the question? Because that's how it used to be.
Mayor, to address yours, I think if, what you're talking about would really fit into the second one we have on the legislative agenda here, which would be looking at the different seats. Because that you could appoint a mayor as an at-large seat. So, and so that would be something that would be different, which would address all aspects. It would address your aspect of, if they're voting in somebody, is he a commissioner? Absolutely. Or she, commissioner?
I don't know if
Absolutely.
she can vote or not.
But yet at the same time, it is an at-large position, so the mayor can come from any aspect of the city. So that was all I wanted to address with what you said.
I'm concerned with having a commissioner serving for their term, their 8-year term, and then saying, okay, I'm done, I still want to be on the board, so now I'm going to run as a mayor. That's,
Worded correctly. Well,
so,
make your intent to not do that.
go ahead, Mr. Willis.
All right, so I can tell you the intent because I'm actually the one proposing it to you, so I can tell you the intent behind it. The intent is, yes, you can serve 8 years as a mayor. You can serve 8 years as a commissioner. And the reason being that you would have, absolutely, because the residents are making the decision. Normally, a chair is not a vocal portion of the board. The purpose of the chair is to organize structure and run the meeting. It is not to have an opinion. It is not to ask questions. It is not, you get your time, but the point of the chair is to conduct the meeting. It is to be the quiet member of the board and to facilitate and conduct the way the meeting is going. That's
Have
the
you
intent.
met our mayor?
And I understand, but it's, again, we're Northport and we do
quiet
things
one.
differently.
Yeah,
But
before
the
you get caught.
intent of being the chair of a board is to facilitate the meeting.
I'm still focusing on the comment. Everything you said was Charlie Brown.
So, right.
She knows I'm messing with her.
So there is a difference of what the intent is. As a resident who was here when the change went into effect, our commission sent out letters. At the time, we didn't have the social media presence, so it was direct mailers that went out. It was town hall meetings that were held to educate the difference between what is a mayor of the city of Northport versus what is the mayor of New York City. How are they different and how does it work within our city? This was an educational point that we did for almost 3.5, 4 years. The residents are still in the same point today that they were then. There was no clear it depends. You got to remember, people are coming from all over the place moving here. And so, yeah, we can educate today, but we're educating our residents today. We can educate all we want, but as people are moving here, they're moving here with a preconceived notion of what is the mayor. So my point behind it is, yes, you're allowing for 16 years, but you're creating an at-large position, an at-large seat on the board. Not only that, but when you're looking at it, you have four spots. One of our things was to bring up the fact of having at-large positions. Not sure why this says one, but our board had actually said we wanted 2 at-large spots. So now you could have 1 at-large commissioner and the at-large mayor. It would be 2 years. We would get to choose who we want to chair the meeting and the style we want chairing as a community. We now get that choice. Do we like CareZone style? Do we like your style? Do we like Hank's style? What style do we like? Hopefully, yeah, Yates, I'm trying to think of who else is. Oh, I thought you said Yates. I'm like, wait a minute, Yates isn't here anymore. Or do you like Yates' style? If that's the style of chairing the meeting you want, now we get to elect that style of what we want. In hopes that they're gonna run off of, this is how I'm gonna chair, I doubt it, but in hopes that this is how the meeting will run, this is what will be done, this is the purpose behind it, it gives us control. We beat up on our mayor, just wait, your abuse is coming. It's coming. We beat up our mayors because in our mind, they are who controls the board. Give us the choice of beating them up and putting them in place and taking them out. Give us that control. Give us the ability of saying, we like you there, we don't like you there.
Talking about is electing somebody that you've already seen in office.
Yeah.
And that is not necessarily so. Venice just
Correct.
elected somebody that's never even sat on a board, conducted a meeting, let alone been
Yep.
on a commission.
And they
I mean-
said that they didn't like anything else that was happening and they wanted something new.
Fish out of water.
Awesome. That is awesome.
No,
That's-
they voted against the other, that's what happened.
Right, but
But-
they,
Okay, one at a time, guys.
Sorry.
Let me finish.
So you-
Happened here in
So
2016.
especially that first year, if you went to election, you don't know.
right?
You don't know what you're getting, and then you're stuck with it. I disagree wholeheartedly about the 2-year thing. I don't like running election like that every 2 years. I think it needs to be
It's already being
4,
done.
and already being the 4 is everybody else, because they are just a commissioner.
If you want to set
Okay.
one person up to chair for
Let
4
me try to
years,
wrangle this up.
Go ahead, Commissioner Carson.
All right, so first and foremost, what about, I'm trying to think about this now, what about amending the language to allow for a consecutive serving of the mayor versus what it is now, only one? I guess we're looking at 2 different options. You can either allow it so that you can have a mayor serve more than once, or you can have the rotation like we used to, and then have it so that, because what it used to be is you could rotate, you definitely rotated, but the person was able to say they did not want to do it, and then it went to the next one. Or the person would say, I would rather so-and-so stay. That was an option as well. And then it skipped them and went to the next one. So I don't know if maybe we're talking, because it sounds like there is no supporting an elected mayor. I don't hear that. So as an alternate, some sort of compromise, what if the proposal was either the rotation with those caveats that it used to be, or do you do a rotation and the ability to serve more than 1 year or something?
A question for the background on this. I thought, because I don't know what was in the charter way back then, you said that it was in there that it rotated by seat. So did it go to referendum to change it, that they were appointed by the
Yes.
commission?
By the commissioners.
Okay, if it is stated that way, why can't we as a commission just say, this is our policy of doing the assignment? We put the rotation in rather than putting it out for a referendum.
I think it's still gonna be a problem because your charter says
charter
one
says,
thing and it's.
Shall appoint annually. The city commission shall appoint annually by majority vote one of its members as mayor and one of its members as vice mayor.
But you would be appointing them, but it would be in a rotation, because that would be a set policy.
Okay, hold on, one at a time, guys. one at a time, wait until I call on you, please. Commissioner Hanks.
I think you would lose a little public trust, right? So this is part of what we're just going through with the redistricting as part of everything else. The citizens said, here's how we would like this done. And then if we create policy, backdoor policy, to do whatever we feel necessary, well, then
I think he's right.
you're interfering with that public trust.
I agree with that. Mr. Willis?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've asked about districting and I've had commissioners tell me, why would we even put it back out there to have that conversation? But yet the residents voted to get rid of the thing and the rotation form of picking, but yet we're gonna make the decision to change it without taking it back to them. Can we change the 2 at-large districts without going to referendum then?
Have to go to referendum.
Then why would it be okay to change that one without going to referendum?
It was a
just-
question I had because it said assign.
Okay, I
And
was,
so how we
was-
assign them wasn't clarified, so it was a
Right.
question. I don't
All
mind
right.
taking it back
So
out there.
let's get some consensuses going, so that way then we can move on. I heard a couple of things here, mayor serve more than one term. These would all have to go to referendum anyways. Any changes that we make to this document has to go to referendum.
absolutely,
I don't care if you're changing the word "the" to "or,"
Yeah.
it goes to referendum.
give the people the choice.
Some of that.
So let's just kind of mayor serve more than one term. What are your thoughts on that, Commissioner Carrison?
If I had to choose, I would personally like to go back to the rotational option and taking out that the only serving one term, but making it an option for whoever's in the secondary rotation to make that choice. Does that make sense? So in other words, you're gonna rotate. Let's just say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which it isn't. You have to look at it. It's a little different considering the way that we're elected, okay? So 1 is up as a mayor. But they really like the way number 5 is doing and running the meetings. 1 chooses to say, I would like to relinquish my year as mayor to give back to number 5 to serve for another year. Now, number 1 doesn't get to be mayor again until the rotation comes back around. The next year, number 2 comes up and says, no, I want to take it. And then number 5's out. Does that make sense?
Now it does. Thank you
Okay.
for the-
But if they wanted to give it to 5,
But
they
if
would
they want to
still.
give it to 5, they can still. So there's no cap, you know what I mean? Because some people come in and they've never served on a board, they've never done anything that had to do with government, and they really are uncomfortable serving as the mayor. And so they may not want, and number 2 may be just as new and green as they themselves. And so they feel, I mean, it's the same thing with Commissioner Yates and I, when we first came in. So I think there should be that option that allows them that flexibility. And if they want it, they take it. You know what I mean? I don't want to, right, because it's their turn. But in the same token, they don't get the turn again.
All right. So now that you gave me the big fat red crayon version of what you were trying to say, I appreciate that. I tend to agree with you. Commissioner Hanks, how do you feel about what Commissioner Carrison was saying?
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I also would not mind if people wanted to vote in a mayor for a 4-year term. However, that means that it would have to be a weak mayor system. I think you definitely don't want to be voting in somebody that is running the city that may not have responsibility. But then again, you would have to look at your redistricting. You would have to have it would have to be an at-large. But I mean, if that's not the direction of the board, I absolutely agree with Commissioner Carrison. I think that is a fine way to do things.
I definitely like what she stated. And though, I mean, when we think about voting in a mayor, I think there's been so much disruption over the last couple of years with that term and stuff. I think going with this idea, letting things settle, see how this, plays out, Because one of the gripes I heard was, they said, well, we didn't get to vote on them. We're left out. Well, if they're deciding how it's done, I think helps to ease that tension that goes on, because they are stating that rotation is what they want. And then a couple years down the road, if it doesn't work out, they still want, to an elect one, well, then we discuss it in a couple of years.
Commissioner Harrison?
Just a final, I get what everyone is saying about the mayor versus chair, and that people do not understand the makeup of our government, and they don't understand a lot of things about government. And I'm sorry, but if we think we can educate the public on everything, I have found, unfortunately, over these last 4 years, because it is so much different than the 8 years I spent prior, I have found in these last 4 years, the public does not want to be educated, most of them. They just don't. They want their opinion, and regardless of how much education you give them, you can give them the flat-out facts, and it will not matter. They have made their mind up, and that is gospel. So and that is my personal opinion. Please do not hold this against the rest of my commissioners, but that is what I have experienced in these last 3.5 years, or 3 years, and it has amazed me how the populace has just completely negated the fact that they should do their own homework, that they should look at what is true and correct and do the research on their own. I am shocked. So, with that said, whatever we do here is not going to change the majority of those folks who do not understand, nor do they care to understand, how this government is made up. Bottom line.
Well, just to add on to that, and yes, it's out there.
You're not turned out.
No, but my question to you was, when you were talking about the mayor could only do it once. Now, if you do 2 terms, that rotation will come around to where you'll be in that 5th spot again, so you would have to do it more than once. So you would not want to put that in the charter to where they can only do it once.
Right. That's what they were saying.
Right, but it used to be the consecutiveness. So
Right,
in
now
other
you
words,
can do
wouldn't
it this
consecutively.
year, and then next year,
Which
it has
is-
to be switched up. But I just wanted to make sure that when we're talking about it, and you said can only do it once, well, you do have the possibility. Playback tape, would you?
What I said is to not make it so that you can only do it once.
Okay,
Remove that wording.
Removing the consecutive limitation, basically.
right, and that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that it was possible.
So I am hearing the consensus to go to the rotation with the ability to relinquish when the time comes for your seat, and removing the consecutive limitation. Is that
Putting no limit on the amount.
removing the consecutive limitations? So I hear a consensus, Commissioner?
I'm for that.
Vice Mayor? Yes. I'm a yes.
Sure.
Yes,
Yes?
okay.
May I ask just clarification
Sure.
for the record? By giving up the opportunity to be mayor, are you then relinquishing it until 4 years?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
5,
Yes?
5 years later,
Or 5 years.
so it's not the next time around.
right.
But that doesn't mean that
Somebody can appoint you
can't
later.
somebody, if, let's say it's my turn to be mayor and he relinquished his ability to be mayor 2 years ago, I say, I would like Commissioner Hanks to be the mayor.
How is that different than what we're doing?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't believe in that.
Well, I mean, but it does go with keeping the mayor the mayor.
Yeah,
Because
it's
if somebody-
basically, we're
Yeah,
still
it's exactly
appointing.
the same thing. She's just appointing someone a different, she's using her seat and saying, I'm giving it to this person.
So it's basically appointing.
I have a question.
But I think you're gonna confuse the folks.
Yeah.
Does a referendum question have to be yes or no, or can it be option A or option B?
No, it's,
I believe it's yes or no.
It's yes or no. You can ask multiple questions, but it's a yes or no answer.
Okay.
All right, so based on that question, no, and this is why it's really important to vet these things out and have these conversations, because everybody sees things a little bit differently and thinks things through differently, and our city attorney just proved that. What's the difference than what we're doing right now, where we're appointing?
Correct, it is, it's, I heard one statement,
Other than the fact that there's a consecutive, you can't serve consecutive.
Correct, there is a consecutive.
out the consecutive aspect.
Then you're doing it.
Yeah, just take out the consecutive aspect.
when it comes to districting, I hear the statement quite often, the people have already spoken, we asked them twice, and this is what their opinion was. It's the same thing with this. We've asked them twice, they've been unhappy with both ways that they voted it in, but yet districting was voted in the same way twice, but yet we always use that statement of, well, we've already done this and we've taken it to the people twice. This is something we're now taking to the people for a third time. It is.
Only- no.
We took it the first time, do you want a mayor, and would it be rotation?
Yes.
That went into play. We then
No.
took it back for the second time to make it to where it was appointed by the commission. That was the second referendum that was changed. We're now going back for a third referendum to where we would ask them, which way do you want it to be now? Would it not make more sense to present a new option instead of going back to the initial option that the people said we don't like? This is all within a 10-year period. It started in 2010.
No.
I don't
The
mind.
chair rotation was 2004, that was one of the very first things I did when I came on board in 2002, was to get rid of the politics involved with appointing chairs.
Right, and then we went to mayor.
Then we went to mayor in 2011.
Okay.
12, many years ago, which is still fresh, just like the district. So I do agree that, do you want a mayor or not, coming back around would be a slap in the face, but the whole rotation thing, that was prior to the mayor.
I'm looking through the history and just doing a cursory look. I only see one thing where we talked about mayor. So I'm only.
That's what I'm saying.
So anyhow, we have our consensus to remove the consecutive limitation and go on rotation.
Okay,
Do we want to change that rotation?
the next question is
Oh,
what type of rotation?
Right, whether or not you can appoint or not appoint within the rotation, which was.
Are you doing it by seat?
It goes by district.
District?
And then it would be up to the city manager or the city attorney to figure out where we sit in that election cycle, what would be up next, so that everyone gets a proper ability to serve. Of course, those that may not be reelected or something like that may be a problem, but there is a way to do it.
We can work on it, but you do have the real opportunity that somebody could get elected to a commission and never be mayor.
Yes, every time. I mean, if they do 4 years, they may never be a mayor,
Yes.
So
even me.
Mm-hmm.
Could end up never being.
based on what the city attorney asked the question of, I'm going to take my vote and change it, only because of your question, and I appreciate that. Because it's really no different than what we're doing right now as appointing.
No, that's not what she said.
But you wanted to do rotation with relinquishing
To the
To
previous.
the person previous.
to one previous.
Correct.
To the who is mayor currently.
Right. That's it. Not to say, hey, I like Joe Blow who just got elected and he and I are buddy, because that's what's gonna happen. I saw it.
That's politics, that's
I
politics.
saw it firsthand.
You
No.
got somebody in that's doing a really good job, and the next person up says, hey, I'll skip my turn, I'd like to see them stay in, I
All right,
think.
as long
I'm
as,
fine as long as it's worded this way, I just.
is that clear then? To you? For one,
We're saying no more than 2 terms?
No, we're not
saying. No.
Any of that.
no limit.
But
That-
it can
that-
only go to a previous mayor,
Right.
to any previous mayor.
Let's
To
use,
the
Or just the
immediate previous
let's,
mayor.
let's
The
use
immediate-
let's use what we've got right currently. I'm sitting in the vice mayor position. If we went to a rotation, way you were voted, I would rotate in as mayor next year. But if I said, I think Debbie's doing a really good job, I'm gonna skip being mayor, I would like her to still serve as mayor, next, I'm in that rotation, I would not be mayor.
No.
And then,
I have a follow-up question to that then. So in that situation, you would no longer be vice mayor, though?
Correct.
Because you would rotate out and let's say he would then become vice mayor. You would go down to the bottom of the rotation. Your seat would.
Yes.
But
Yes.
they're also saying that you cannot appoint any previous mayor. So it's only the mayor just prior.
Correct.
Okay.
The seat.
Right, you can retain the seat, there it is.
Can't appoint, you can retain.
Mr. Duval.
As it states now, there's no consecutive.
Correct.
And I think that is something that might want to change. Overall, you want to be looking at how is the commission/mayor serving the city the best? And there may be some situations where you may have 4 commissioners that are relatively new and have no experience. You may have someone like Commissioner Carazone, who was a commissioner for how long, first time, 8 years the first time, and now another 4 years. Look at her experience, where you may want to say, who do we want for our mayor versus someone that it's their very first term and they're still a little tepid about things. So you want to make sure that whatever you do, you leave yourselves the option to get the best person.
Make a good point,
I just thought that. You make an excellent point.
because
Now
if,
it's
because
getting
if
to me.
Commissioner Carasone
It's turned
is the
out.
only one on, well, let's say she's the only one that's on the board, everyone else is new, and the very next
Yep.
person
Who's new too.
is brand new, but yet she is not the previous mayor, because the previous
That's
mayor
why I
got,
was-
yeah.
That's why I was
Okay.
saying.
Well, then you can't
So-
reappoint
I
a
know.
previous mayor, which goes back into.
What
the-
about with supermajority vote? You do a supermajority vote that would say that that person that's out of the secession, past or future, you have a supermajority vote that they could be appointed as mayor. Because that's an excellent point.
I appreciate your point and your comment. I'm leaning more towards that. We just need to remove the consecutive limitation from because that way then we can appoint everybody. To get into these weeds is going to complicate things even worse. We are elected by the people to represent the city as commissioners.
So let
This
us
is-
choose our chair.
Why?
Why? Well, you're already electing as a commissioner. And
It's because that's what the people have been asking you for. They are throwing a fit. They beat up the mayor for the decisions that an entire commission makes. We put all of our attention on one person,
but we shouldn't. We are not doing that.
but it's we as a community most certainly are. We as a community absolutely are.
Ask me.
Commissioner Hanks, do you feel that you took attention on things that were not yours?
I know I did.
Right. It's as a mayor, we look at you as the person who is in charge of this meeting. When we see what we don't like, give us the opportunity to change it. If you make it 4 years, we're stuck with that person for 4 years.
Not as a mayor. It's only
Does-
one.
But it's, as
Sorry,
you said
Mayor's
earlier, if
proposal.
you make it to where with the mayor elected by the people, you do it at 4 years. We're stuck with that person for 4 years. There's a few of our chairs that we've had over the last 10 years I don't want for 4 years. But I'm cool with being stuck with them for 2 years. And knowing that at the end of that 2-year term, I get to make a choice of whether they're the chair again or not.
There's
If
an
there's-
election every 2 years anyways.
Correct. So it's not costing us any more money. It's just if you want the middle chair, you have to make the effort every 2 years. The only person that's inconvenienced is the person chairing the meeting, not the public, not the rest of the commission, nobody else. It is simply the person chairing the meeting. So yeah, you as the chair, you're going to have to think, well, in 2 years, if they don't like me, I'm out. Yeah, you're out. At the end of 2 years, you can run for commissioner. become a commissioner at that end of that 2-year wait period where the people said, we don't like you as the chair, but we feel you would be a great commissioner. We just feel that you take up all the time. You don't give enough time.
That's gonna happen
talk-
regardless.
But now we have the choice of changing that. Where right now, you guys are in control over who chairs the meeting. You're in control of who gets the amount of abuse. We get no say-so at all.
Well, that's
You
why.
guys
The
need to choose it.
rotation
That's
would
why it
work.
rotates every
Yeah,
year.
that's
Go
why-
ahead, Mr. Duval, and then we're gonna wrap this up and move on.
Okay. Back to Commissioner Carazone's point about the public, not being able to educate the public. My basic recommendation is to try to use the city's outreach, Mr. Taylor, I believe, to try and, maybe put something on the Facebook page every day educating that the mayor is not totally responsible for everything that happens in this city.
And
It's the internet. That's what, that's what it is. The public,
We've done it for years and
Well, it's-
years and years.
it's the only thing to found out, because it is the internet and people do make comments with no education whatsoever. And like taxes got raised this year.
Yeah.
The mayor
30%.
took a whole pile of crap for that, but it's, the commission as a whole voted for that. It's the situation we were in from past commissions. It's the situation from the way this city was developed by general development.
All right, so,
Here's one I have written down.
yes, please.
Just is to remove the consecutive limitation and move to a rotation of mayor by district. The incoming mayor can choose not to serve, and the sitting mayor will retain the seat, but the incoming mayor cannot appoint someone that is not currently serving as the mayor,
Unless supermajority vote.
unless through super majority vote.
And I think once we see this and have another conversation, we see the language in writing and we vet this through again, because this is not going to referendum as of right now. This is just discussion.
And that's another question, though. When do we need those questions back in order for them to make the deadline for the?
That-
They put our meeting for tomorrow. Everything you discussed today then comes to us tomorrow and then moves for referendum to come back to you guys for referendum. This is a very rapid meeting that we're sitting here to have. That's why we're sitting here.
All right, so, based on what the city attorney read, let's get a consensus based on what he read. Commissioner Carrison.
Should I read it again?
Yes, please.
Remove consecutive limitation and move to a rotation of mayor by district. The incoming mayor may choose not to serve, and the sitting mayor will retain the seat, but the incoming mayor cannot appoint someone that is not currently serving as mayor unless through a supermajority vote.
All right, thank you very much, city attorney. And Commissioner Carrison.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanks.
I'd be a no, I'd go more with it.
Commissioner Arnold.
I'm a yes.
I'm a yes.
And I'm a yes. So that passed 4-1 by consensus based on what city attorney had read.
What happens if there's no supermajority vote? Now you have no chair. What do you guys do then?
No, it goes to automatic
It
rotation.
would have to be the
It'd be a
That
rotation.
person already refused it.
Yeah.
You're not saying you
Goes
can
to
go
the
to the
next
next
one.
person.
Goes to the next one.
You already said it couldn't go to the next one based off of what you said, because it has to be done by a supermajority or that direct person. So
It's a
now you're saying-
rotation. It's just natural. If somebody doesn't, then it goes to the next one.
How does the law read it?
I would say that if there's a supermajority that says you can't refuse it, then I would assume you can refuse it. You are the mayor now.
You can't refuse it.
I would assume, but it would be clear, it would be better to say that.
Let me clarify, the supermajority is only if someone is trying to appoint someone that's outside the rotation. So if there is no supermajority, then it would automatically go to the next rotation,
Which would
correct?
rotate to the next willing participant.
It's my turn to be mayor, and I want it to retain as the current mayor, and the current mayor says they don't want to do it anymore. I cannot pass it along. It's my job now.
No, it can go to the
Based off of
vice.
that, you can't pass it along.
That's
based
if
off
you
of what the
accept
wording
it.
is.
You still have the right to not accept it, and it would move to the next person. They not accept it and move to the next
Say
person.
that.
Not off the word.
Well, that's what I'm saying. How does the law see it?
I am the mayor now. I come in, I am the mayor now. I have the option to refuse to be mayor and give it to the currently sitting mayor. They retain that position. If they don't want that position anymore, I am the mayor.
You have to take it. You have no choice.
Unless you ask for someone else.
Unless the supermajority votes.
But if they don't get the supermajority, then you
You're the
have,
Because now
mayor.
it becomes political.
there is no rotation.
No, I just.
Guys, I don't see it the way Mr. Willis does, that the decision has to be made by the Charter Review Board tomorrow. I see this as coming back to the commission with the draft language and then going to the Charter Review Board. Because according to the city attorney, we have a few months. This is not something that has to be done by January 1st. This is something that we can still vet and have this conversation on.
I think you better
I know that
ask.
Amber had stated last week that we still had time.
Thank
And
you.
what we're doing at tomorrow's meeting is going over everything
Thank
they've
you.
discussed today, so the whole board knows. And then y'all can come back again.
Exactly.
Amber
you
said it was
guys-
not a rush. We just want to be able to put it all into one ordinance.
Were we not told at our board meeting that it had to be done in the time period because of the amount of time that we had for it to come back to the charter review?
So we have the majority
I'm not sure.
to proceed with
Because
what,
that's why we were told we couldn't discuss it during the charter review meeting. It had to be discussed today.
Mr. Willis,
I'm not understanding, but
we're gonna move on. We have the consensus. Commissioner Emmerich,
I just wanted to ask a question about this trail. If the mayor.
okay, let's use the sitting board right now. I'm mayor.
Okay,
She's going to be possibly the new incoming mayor based
In
on our
rotation.
discussion, on rotation.
Declines. She verbally declines right now and says, I would like Mayor McDonald to keep the reins. You know, I've had my year and McDonald, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm Ronald.
I was thinking a different Ronald, but that's all right. Let's say. You said, no, I've done my year, I've had enough, I don't want to do it anymore. No, she's already declined, okay? Now, in the line, let's say I'm vice mayor. You two have both declined. Now I would come up to be mayor. Because you both declined. So in the line, the vice mayor would be the next person to come up. And then they say, well, I'll accept that. And then you just need your regular three.
The next person would be the vice mayor.
And then the next person in rotation would be the vice mayor. That's how I see that scenario working.
You take it, I would say, let's get a consensus on how you would like it to proceed that way. If the incoming mayor refuses, and so does the currently sitting mayor, what would you like to see happen?
It goes in the next rotation.
Goes in the
Would you like to see
rotation.
Next
the
rotation.
incoming mayor has to serve, or the next person? in line?
Somebody serving that doesn't want to serve.
That's what I'm saying. If they're gonna force somebody to do it.
Back to the mayor, I could take.
Yeah, so what, yeah, to have a consensus on the direction of what to do in that situation.
All
Make
right.
it clear.
God, and I thought that would be the easy conversation.
I thought that was common sense, but go ahead and get your consensus, please.
All right.
Ask a lawyer, there can't be common sense.
So, city attorney, is this clear for you to draft? We gave them a consensus, 4-1.
He needs consensus on the next rotation portion.
If I refuse to serve as incoming mayor, then it's the next incoming mayor,
Okay, so,
in which case it could go all the way around to the currently sitting mayor.
Everybody could decline and then you'd be no mayors.
If everyone declines, then what happens? That's a good question.
okay, so we have consensus, let's get consensus to do it with the rotation basis.
Yes?
Thanks.
As a rotation basis, yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I'm a yes. All right. City attorney, is that now crystal clear?
If the incoming mayor refuses, then the next person in line is the mayor, right?
Right.
And then if everyone in the commission refuses, then the city attorney becomes the mayor?
All right, that's a good segue. All right, so the other discussion was
What
not,
happens if everyone refuses?
then we have one hell of a problem on our hands, and I just don't know how that can even be addressed in writing.
Called 5 non-mayors.
Leave it to the people, the public, to make the decision.
I don't see 5 people declining, knowing that by the time you get to number 5, if they decline, what do you do then? I don't see that
Have the
happening.
public recall them all.
Well,
Exactly.
I do think then, if that's the case, then the next sitting mayor would be forced to do it. And I think that would be the easiest way to do it.
Yes,
Yes.
like if I said, I don't want to,
Right. And make it all the way
she
back to
doesn't, she
you.
doesn't, well, I'm stuck doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only logical way to do it. And then that closes the gap.
You got a consensus on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. All righty. So let's move on to another hot topic. Citizens, us, Charter Review Board had discussed about, why does that keep breaking?
My knee's bumping in.
A non-essential for X amount of dollars be placed on a voter referendum for the citizens to decide to move forward. And I think what prompted this whole discussion was the pool, that we spent $12 million of non-essential on something that extravagantly priced. And I'm just.
Well, you
using
guys
general-
did, the mayor did at that time.
So I'm just using it as a general topic because that's one of the things that was brought up. So in the November 12th thing, I had said that we need to determine what is considered non-essential and also determine what is that X dollar amount. So based on the last conversation that took a very, very long time, do we want to tackle this or do we want to take a 15-minute break?
I'm for a break.
15 minutes. See you at 11:15. reconvene. I do have a public comment. I don't know if Mr. Dobrin's,
He'll probably be right back.
hey, guys.
You want me to go outside and see if he's here?
Would you please?
Yeah.
Because if we can get public comment taken care of before we move on to the next item.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Wasn't you? Okay.
Give it 1 second.
Okay.
We're just waiting for public commenter to come back in the room.
What was the last topic we were on?
We are going to be moving into the non-essential X dollar amount to
Okay, I
be
know we
placed.
had started something.
Jeez, you got a full one over there.
We need to wait on public comment at this point.
Yeah, if he is, well, we also have to wait for
There
Commissioner.
he is.
If you could step aside so he can use your seat, one of you. Mr. Dobrin, if you could please come up and give your public comment, please.
Thank you for providing me this opportunity.
I figured it now would be the
Spend
most.
less time inside and enjoy the sun outside. Thank you. Victor Dobry, 20327 Real Circle. I heard you talking about rotation. I spoke last year about rotation. I had a schedule at that time how to be done. I think this should be blind in the sense that, as I mentioned to former Mayor Hanks last year, when you run for a city commissioner seat, you should be prepared mentally to be the mayor. And he became the mayor after that. And he did a good job, correct? I mean, it's debatable. But it's debatable, but you did a good job. So, with that being said, my proposal is to not get too fancy about this and confuse the poor attorney that he might take the function of the mayor after all that. I think it can be done very clearly, very blindly. It doesn't matter. We all are grown-ups if we are here, and we should be capable to do that job if we are candidates. Don't complicate the charter with all that bazooka, you know? I mean, leave it simple, stupid. So, you know my opinion on that. And I wish good luck to all of them. And I can provide you a very good rotation based on the seats. I will go back to see which seats they get elected and provide such that, you know, it's in conjunction with the vice mayor too. I had one last year when I spoke. I probably still have it somewhere in my papers, but you know, while you were speaking, I was trying to clarify to me how I would do it if I were invested to such authority as you have. Make it simple, make it blind. Everybody should be mental. If they don't want to do it, then they should not run for city commissioner, period. No complications. And no offense to anybody. But you take that responsibility. Regarding to the expenditure caps, which is very dear to me, I printed this before I came. And it's very interesting how different city has taken. The conclusion of this article, which never has been done, this is 2016, is the conclusion that after adopting alpha limit, municipal revenue, average in expenditure and average limited city decision, of expense increases. And I will show you the chart. Look what happened in 10 years. Before they adopted, it keeps increasing. After that, they decrease. And most of them, they were implemented in the charter as you are discussing right now. And one of the ability is to even limit the taxes. Like we have the Constitution saying the property taxes for schools and everything says 3% or the inflation rate, whichever is smaller. You can do the same for the city. And that puts the burden on city manager and the departments to do their job the best their ability. Thank you. And I can speak for hours, but I know that your time is precious.
Thank you. All righty, so we're going to move on to a discussion about non-essential spending for X dollar amounts. I know the Charter Review Board has kind of given consensus or recommendations of $7.5 million or more, go to referendum, and then in another one, it was $5 million or more. So I think we need to have a discussion on this, and I think before we go forward, do we even want to have this discussion, or are we going to keep this in the charter as it is? So to move forward with a discussion, Commissioner Carrison.
I just do not think that it should be in there. That's the whole point of us being elected. If they don't like it, then they need to be here and they need to voice their opinions on the numerous amounts of public meetings that we have on each subject. And furthermore, I think that, where was I going with that? I think that it's very, very unclear. I don't think you could ever create the verbiage to cover all caveats of what is described as necessary and unnecessary, because necessary to me could mean unnecessary to you, and I think that it is impossible to do that.
Do you want to have this discussion, or I'm keeping it broad right now? Okay, Commissioner Haynes.
Exactly what Commissioner Carrison said. I would say kill it with everything she mentioned.
I am all for the discussion. Commissioner Luke.
Discussion.
Commissioner Lynch.
I'm for it, the way it is. Kill it.
Well, at that point, sadly, there's no point in having the discussion. I strongly feel that this needs to be in the charter, that we have a dollar amount and that we spend the time to determine what is non-essential. What is that dollar amount? This is something that the Charter Review Board had recommended. This is something that the citizens have outcried for, and I am in complete agreement. But sadly, we don't have a majority to even have the discussion. Commissioner Luke.
I'm in agreement with your statements. To me, again, it's that transparency type thing. And I don't want a large ticket item going to the people, for people to take a vote on referendum of whether they want that amenity or not. I think that's, I think it's the right thing to do. The dollar amount of it, anywhere from 5 to 10 million, to me would suffice.
So, moving on. Commission makeup. Wow, I'm really disappointed.
Commission makeup?
Yeah, that's what I dubbed it, because, so for districting, the Charter Review Board had made a recommendation of a 7-member board, and then at another time, they had made a recommendation for a 4-district, 1-at-large board. And I was wondering, do we even want to have this conversation now for the referendum in 2020?
Are you going down the city clerk's list?
Yeah, I don't
Is that
know
what you're
where
going
you're
down?
going.
I'm going down by
There's a
the
couple of them.
October 31st to commission memo that we received. We all received it. It's directed to commission, and it's on October 31st. The Charter Review Board met on October 30th and discussed the items below. So this is what I was using as a template. So back in the Charter Review Board back in July.
I'm sorry, but is that in our backup?
It was on November 12th, yes, ma'am. Back in, July 11th, the Charter Review Board had recommended a 7-member, 2 being at large and 5 being districted. And then in the October 31st, it was 4 and 1.
Nope, 3 and 2. The vote was 4 to 1.
No, it says here, motion made by Chair Hutchinson, seconded by Willis, that the Charter Review Board recommends that the City Commission to change to 4 districted seats with 1 being at large. It's right here.
I know, but I talked to her about that. It was actually a 3-2, not a 4-1. According to our minutes, it was 3-2, not 4-1. It's a typo.
Okay, so
Isn't this what we just discussed? Right? This is one we just talked about, right?
I have it right here, ma'am.
Do the March 6th minutes?
No, I don't have the minutes. I have the memo. This is why I love workshops.
It's not a typo, that's exactly what the minutes said. 1 being a district
Okay.
at large seat.
All right.
Did we just talk about this? I obviously heard you wrong twice, sorry.
Do we want to continue and have this discussion about the commission districting and makeup of the commission board?
Yes.
Sure.
That's what we're here for, isn't it?
Yeah, I got no issues with this one.
Okay, and actually, I am not in favor because we have the 2020 census coming up, and I think that this particular subject should wait until we get our 2020 census with our actual numbers based on the districts and how many people are in them. So that way then we could have a much larger discussion after the census using actual numbers.
And
Because
see,
we may-
I see it, if we have this discussion now of how many districts we want, after you have your census, then is when you apply the numbers to that district.
Absolutely.
That's what I was holding my hand up for, was that I agree. If you can get it passed within the 2020 election and make sure that you state that, in my personal opinion, is 3 districts, 2 at large, and then you have those districts drawn through the 2020 census, and it can take effect after that. It's not that it's automatic, it's just that you're going to have it approved in 2020. Does that make sense? So it wouldn't be
It doesn't
approved
matter.
until
It's 4 to 1, So we're
2022.
going on with the discussion. So
Only myself and Commissioner Luke were talking.
I saw, yes,
Yes,
yes, yes, yes, and I said no. So I explained why I was against
Sorry.
it. So,
I thought that was just for discussion.
no,
but, okay.
it's just general discussion. Did we want to have the discussion? And it was approved, so, I don't really know which way, because to me, they're totally different things. A 7-member board versus a 4-1, 1 being at large board is a totally different kind of thing. So, somebody want to go ahead, Commissioner Hanks?
I would tend to, rather than a 4-1 and even a 7-member board, I don't think the city needs a 7-member board. I would be more inclined, if we were to switch it, to do a 3-2, as Commissioner Carrasone had mentioned.
I agree.
I agree.
I feel that would be more advantageous to the city.
3 districts, 2 at large? Okay, so do we have a consensus to work on a 3-district with 2 at large?
Yes.
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 By doing that, it alleviates another one of your points that you'll be discussing later too.
So at this point then, how, well,
I think we need consensus.
how does the districting, how is that going to look? Right now, we have 5.
So the consensus would be 3 districts, 2 at large. In order to draw those districts up, we would utilize the 2020 census. And that, at that point, when that is approved and those districts are approved, it would take effect at the next general election.
Take effect at the next general election 2020 or next general election 2022?
Well, it can't be done before 2022 because first of all, the referendum for this won't be done until November of 2020. And if you're waiting until the next, at which point, then we'll start the process of finding the districts. Because you'll have, so then we'll work on getting the districts set up based on the population of 3 districts. it, you know, as some have seen, it can happen pretty quickly, or it can take longer. But I think that with the census information, we should be able to get it fairly quickly of what the 3 districts, that I believe was done, I'm trying to remember when we did the district approval by this commission, not this, but by the city commission. I think that's around. There was
2010 vote.
presentations done, trying to remember if I don't remember if it was adopted by a resolution or an ordinance, as far as the actual lines, not the choice to go districting, but how the districts themselves were drawn. We had tons of meetings on them. So once that is approved, and the district lines don't get approved by the voters, it doesn't go out to a vote. So then, when the next election came up, then that's when it would take effect.
Who does the work of making sure the lines in the districts?
We'll hire somebody. We would hire somebody. There's nobody here that, that's not something, you want a staff member doing it. You want an independent person to do it. So, and that's the way it was done last time too, is we had an independent person set the districts up.
Fantastic, thank you. Commissioner Lynch.
The one thing that we may want to think about also is when we go into this redistricting, going down into 3 districts, if that were to happen. Right now, we have districts 1 through 5, and as the election cycle comes up, you have 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5. You would want to make sure that within each election cycle, you would have like 2 and 1 at large for that election cycle, and then 1 and 1 at large for the next election cycle. And that would make it a little bit better for the citizens out there that would want to run. You would always have an at-large position up for election.
All right, let's get a consensus to have 1 at-large each election cycle.
All of that would be done when you're doing the districting. I mean, you can put it in the charter, but
So, okay, I think what we're doing is we're maybe jumping ahead. So maybe what we're focusing on right now is the referendum for 2020, which is to 3 districts, 2 at large. If that is approved, then we have another conversation about districting, how at large and stuff like that. Commissioner Harrison.
I can only tell you the last time. It stated that seats X, Y, and Z would turn over to districts at this time. Seats X, Y, and Z would turn over to districts at this time. And so they had absolute dates. And if they didn't get districted on a timely fashion, it would then go to the court to make that decision, which I still think is very important that that is left in there, because it was kind of done at the last minute the last time. So I think it's important to have those seats still clarified, that that district 1 or whatever it is and 1 at large is going to be activated in 2022, and then the next set in 2024. And then what happens is that the resolution would justify what those 3 districts are. And that's it. At least that's how it was. Now, if you can do it a different way, and you just say 3 at large, 2 at large and 3 districts, and then the resolution handles the fact that one of those at large seats is done every 2 years, I don't know, but that's not how they did it in the past.
Well, in the past, you had 5 seats going to 5 districts.
Correct.
We now have 5 districts going to 3.
Right.
So there may be a way to just change it all at one time instead of the phasing in over 2 years, because that was horribly confusing.
Right. So I don't know.
which way we do it, we're gonna run into issues, depending on where the district lines are, where a sitting commissioner lives. Because you stand a very good opportunity that where the lines get drawn, somebody is not going to be in a district that's up for election, or in their district when that seat converts.
But you have at-large seats.
Exactly.
Hang on. But if that happens, like the city manager just said, you could put a provision, the sitting commissioner can fulfill the remaining of her term without getting booted out.
Yep, and that's all in the districting part, not in the charter part. So,
Mr. DeValle.
Part of this for this idea that Pete was just bringing up is when you do a redistricting, some people that lived on the line of the districts, as that line moves, some of those people are going to be put into a new district. And now if they want to run for office, they can't because they haven't lived in that new district for a year. So one possible solution that I thought of is that we just change the charter to get rid of that idea that someone has to live in the district, let me finish, live in that district for a year and change it to that they have lived in that residence for a year before the election. That way, no matter which district they're in, they can still run for office. Are you following me?
I do, but I also see a problem that if you're living in that residence for a year, what's the point of districting?
Okay, you have a district, okay? Here's District 1, here's District 2, for example. Okay? This gentleman lives in District 2. Now, because of population changes, he now lives in District 1, and there's an election coming up for seat 1. And because he hasn't been in District 1 for the last year, he can't run. And that's just totally wrong, okay? So if you say that in the charter, if there has been a district change and he has lived in his residence, he can still run for that new district that he's in.
But we have at-large seats now, so.
The at-large will help. The at-large will help with that. But you still, you know how we live in a Sioux country that someone's going to say like, well, everybody else could run for either or. I can only run for one.
Commissioner.
Yeah, in all due respect, I see that as just kind of part of life. Things change and you get voted out of certain things. I just don't know that we as a board can make everything fair and equitable to every single person that is out there. I just think you start to convolute the entire issue, and then you end up with, so much verbiage that nobody can keep track of what's going on. I just think that's part of it. Every so often, the districts are going to change because the population will be out of count. And possibly, if the south side's growing faster than the north side, then the districts are going to change. And that's just part of living life,
Commissioner Lynch.
Well, the one thing that we're looking at too is if we go to 3 different districts and we have 2 at large, well, an individual could live in District 3, choose not to run for District 3, and choose to run for at large. So then you got different players in the mix as well. You could have a seating commissioner saying, well, so-and-so's running for 3 now, I'm gonna go to the at-large seat. There's a lot of different scenarios that could take place in this big picture going forward.
City Manager.
one thing I did want to point out that I've seen in some other areas, that when you go to a 3-2, and 2 of them being at large, you then have a very strong possibility that one district could have the majority on the commission.
Could have 3.
One neighborhood could have the control of your commission. Because 2 at large could be next door neighbors, and the 3rd districted person could be on the other side of that neighbor.
But you can do that with lines too. The line's right there, and somebody could live here and somebody could live there, and then somebody live here. I mean, even with that scenario, it still can be done. And it's the election of the people. If the people elected them and they're all living in this, well, guess what?
Then why have districts?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I'd
I'd much rather see you put about the referendum for no districts, let them all 5 be at large,
I would
but the
too.
people want districts.
And we got into this position because we had a majority of the commission all living in one area. That's,
Right.
we had 3 at one point.
Three of them.
And there's no way to avoid it.
Okay, guys, one At a time, please. Let me call on you, please. City manager, go ahead.
There is a way to avoid it, is you have 5 districts, or you don't have the ability to have a majority come, meaning 2 at large, come from one neighborhood.
Mr. Duval.
With the 5 districts, as districts grow, like the West Villages is gonna grow, you're gonna be moving, in order to keep the population the same in each district, you're gonna be moving lines. So now you're gonna have people from the West Villages living in both District 5 and District 4. Okay, so there again, you've got the neighbors. It's almost impossible with districts to keep away from that issue. And there's one more issue here that has been discussed. What happens for any individual, well, this is where it will help. It's the same thing. No individual decides to run for a particular seat. If you have the at-large, that helps. And, there's different suggestions how to.
Well, and, I'm sorry.
Mr. Emmert, you had your hand up.
The one thing that it looks at too is that with this scenario, one community could actually run the whole town. Oh, it's possible.
Commissioner Haynes.
Yeah, I would also say that, I would be for not having districts. Part of the concept of the opposition, if you want to say, would be to give that information. Listen, this is what I would do. Do you really want 3 folks from one neighborhood controlling the entire city? So, I think that's the only way to, if you're not going to do 5 separate districts with no at-large, I think the only way to really do it and keep it as equitable as possible is to have no districts at all and have everybody at large.
Mr. Willis.
So I think that, I understand that we're trying to be fair and equitable within our district lines, and we don't want one community to have more people in. But just keep in mind, I moved districts to run for a school board district. So if I live in a neighborhood where I've got 5 very active people, and we all sit in my driveway and discuss how we're gonna go run against other people, it's only 1 year that you have to wait. So you're gonna have 5 people who used to be neighbors who now can serve on a commission, even though they live in different districts. I don't understand what the point of you might live in Sable Trace with somebody else is. I get it. So Sable Trace might get some kind of an acceptance in a quasi judicial hearing, which if the commissioner does that, isn't it unethical and immoral anyways, if we're going to that point? So we've got provisions in place to protect from some of this behavior. But I think what we're looking at from the charter review is the bigger picture of, you've got 5 districts. We're getting to the point where we're getting less and less people in certain districts that are running. You've got areas where, our maps just showed that our districts were written at 53,000 people. We've got 25,000 more people in our city and we haven't redistricted it. So the districts were supposed to be done whenever there were X amount of people in the district. We're not following what it says anyway. We're already 25,000 people more than when we districted last time, and I think that.
Well, that's not quite right, okay, per the charter.
Mr. Willis, please finish.
So I get that we're trying to be fair and equitable. 3 and 2 solves a problem. So you might have 2 people that live next door. What's the difference between 2 people from a household running one right after each other? What's the difference between somebody splitting up and you running over here? Commissioner Carrizone moved from one district into District 1 to be able to run. I'm sorry. She had to stay within the district that she filed in and ended up having to get a house.
Actually look for a
in that
house
district. Yeah,
in
I'm
that
sorry, I said it
district.
backwards.
Yeah.
But I've moved for the point of a district. It is something you do. What is this going to solve? It's the bigger picture, non-districted, districted, 3 to 2. Is it really, what are we solving with the district lines?
Mr. Duval.
As far as the districts, when they were set up, District 5 was already set up with 3.3% more people than any other district. Okay, it's based on average. And since that time, District 5 has grown. The charter doesn't say that you have to redistrict when you get above. What it says is, if after the census, if there is a difference of 5%, then you will redistrict. But it also says that it doesn't preclude you from redistricting at another time based on population, whether if, say, a different area has been annexed or just a large population growth. So you can redistrict, but it doesn't say you have to.
But that was kind of a state law. That you had to redistrict when there's an X amount of percentage between your districts.
10%.
Not what the charter says.
But the charter can't override state law.
Correct, that's what I'm
The
saying.
charter says when we will do it according to our laws,
Correct,
but I believe it's state law that says 10%.
thank you. So 10%, we should have redistrict is what my point is.
It's if the districts are more than 10% out of whack.
Correct.
5% for the charter.
But the charter says.
So the charter's
you'll
got to
do-
be changed.
Well, no, the charter says you'll do it if you're out of whack after the census. State law doesn't refer to the census. State law refers to whether you're just out of whack, period.
Correct.
So if in that 10-year period, one area of town blew up and District 5 became 3 times the size of District 4, according to the law, you have to redo it, not according to the charter. And
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, I agree, we need to have that clarified in the charter that the requirement of disparity will be addressed immediately, and we will use whatever data is necessary. The 10% disparity, and all you need to do is really refer to the state statute. That's all you need to do. And then the other thing is that, you know, this whole, someone may be next door to another, blah, blah, blah. You might have 3 people in, say, one area. That's the whole point of getting the consultant to draw those maps out so that they can determine the populace in each area and draw it so that there's a cohesiveness to the 3 districts. I cannot ever see that say West Villages would have its own district if you're going to make it into 3. It's not possible. I mean, we have 70,000 people. They have like 2,000, I think, was the 6,000.
No, their maximum wouldn't even be close.
And even, I was gonna say, even at their maximum build out, they're not going to be able to say that they would represent one entire district. So I think that what would happen is that you would have, yes, a part of it would be in West Villages, but the majority of it would be outside of that village because you're splitting it in 3. I would love to see something that says, you know, Sumter here, Toledo Blade here, East End here, you know, and kind of keep it consistent with people who have similar neighborhoods to them, you know, versus kind of just trying to draw maps that keep everybody happy, if you know what I mean. So
Is the bigger conversation to have the 1-year limitation? Because in all honesty, that's what causes the issue. So,
I wasn't done.
oh,
Oh, I thought you were, that's why I called on him, I apologize.
Look at him.
she
No,
called
I
me,
just
for the
thought
record,
you-
she called me.
Keep it up. I'm next to you. I'll slap you. All right. The other problem is that, see, now you got me all messed up. The other problem of going back to just getting rid of the districts, I think is pretty much it's not going to happen. Specifically because they just passed those independent districts, the single member districts. And I think that's a fight that I'm not willing to go for, because I think it'll just become another slap in the face to the individuals who voted for it the first 2 times. So in order to suffice the fact that we have an issue, it's obvious that we have an issue as per the charter board, that the 3-2, and I think that they can map it out so that it's appropriately proportioned, and we can review those when that comes. So
Hold on,
I'm done now.
thank you. Mr. Willis?
So the person that did have to move for a district was Peter Bartolotta. Somebody sent me a text message, so I apologize. He had missed it by, I believe it was a couple of days that he ended up having to move into the new district or run by with his move or whatever happened, and he wasn't able to run the first time he planned on it. So is the real issue whenever you look at districting, the 1 year wait time? We're one of the only entities in the county that requires you to wait 1 year to be considered in your district. I'm cool with the 1 year resident requirement. I understand that purpose behind it. Even 1 year resident requirement, I think, is too little, bless you. I think that you should have to live here longer, but that's neither here nor there. But that 1 year, if you move out of one district into another and you've already filed to run, you then have to withdraw from the race because you moved into another district, even if you moved 9 months in advance. So would that 1 year window being shortened or adjusted in some way, would it change the outcome of this conversation? Would it change the outcome of the bigger picture? I don't know if you're even following what I'm saying or if I'm talking in a circle.
No, I think we addressed it. That's why I'm looking at the charter.
Vice Mayor, gosh, I've got to get used to
Just
that.
don't worry about it. The residency, I think, is important to the districting. And I think what we have is a hybrid that gives us both, a little bit of both of what we're after. The at-large and the districting, because they did vote for districting. It is going to make a larger area, but they have to do it, the consultant will have to do it by population. So they'll draw those lines to make the population equal. We talk about West Village blowing up, but look at what's going on in Cypress Falls.
Yeah.
In that area. I mean, there's probably as many homes being built in that area as there is up in West Village right now, too. We have apartment complexes coming into another area. There's like 3 apartment complexes. That's a lot of people there, too. So it's not just West Village, it's all the districts. But that, I think, is accomplishing by the 3-2, is accomplishing what we're after. The at-large will allow somebody from, the same district that somebody else is in to run. I think it's great. But as far as the 1 year residency, I still think that's important because it keeps somebody from jumping all around the city, renting here, renting there, so that they can get themselves into an elected position. So I understand the logic behind it. If somebody plans 2 years ahead of time, more power to them. But for somebody to jump around just a few months ahead of time because they want to challenge somebody else or have fun or whatever, no, I see the logic in having them.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We'll see it served 2 times.
Are you finished?
My question wasn't about the,
I'm not talking about reelection. I'm just talking about
I'm just
even
saying,
going
moving
into it.
around, you can only do that once anyways.
Mr. Willis?
my question isn't about the amount of time that you've lived in the city. It's the amount of time that you're in that district. So somebody, let's say for instance, that you've been in your home and, I mean, we put in situations to where the commissioner can live out of district for a year, but yet, I guess my point is that 1 year window where we're talking about the districts of the 5, if it's a 6-month requirement or a 3-month requirement and you're still required to be a resident of the city for a year or more, I understand your point of people moving. If you care that much about what's happening within your government that you're willing to move, rock on, more power to you. Thank you for caring that much.
Might be to go after somebody that they don't like. You're looking at it in a good way, but I mean, people need to be established.
Commissioner Carrison.
Real quickly, you are correct. It was Mr. Bartolotta that had an issue, and the problem was that was the qualification date. He would have been a year per the qualification date. So in 2018, we changed that. And on page 5, it says every candidate, let's see here, where is it? Shall be elected, resident, particular district for a minimum of 1 year prior to the close of the qualification period of nominees. okay, and must submit an affidavit of residency. So we changed that so that now you have that time frame up to the end of that qualification period, where at the time it was as soon as you file, no, it was as soon as you file.
Yeah, I had to
Get it?
wait, I had to wait a month to file.
Right, so we did address that, exactly what you're saying.
All right, so we already have a consensus to do 3 districts, 2 at large. So city attorney has that direction. Using, I'm sorry?
All have his
Oh,
hand
I
up.
didn't see your hand up. I apologize.
That's okay. I just want to make a point here. I've been looking at this districting and population thing for the last month or so. And I want to ask all of you, who knows what the population is in any of the districts at this point? Because I went to 4 different city departments. I got sent from one place to the next. I got sent to the Board of Elections. Board of Elections said, we look at voters, not population. They sent me back to the city, who sent me to them.
That's why there's a census.
I just want to ask someone who knows, who's keeping track of what the population is?
City manager, is that done census, that information available because of census? Or is that information available when they first drew those district lines? How did they determine those district lines?
District lines were done at the time, I believe it was by the census, I'm not positive, because I wasn't heavily involved in that back in that year. But like the charter says it has to be when it's done at the census. Now state law says if you're at, like I say, if you're more than 10%, are we keeping track of that? Not that closely, no.
Yeah.
So I would presume that when those district lines were drawn, they had some kind of a population number to be able to draw those lines.
These are the exact numbers of the plan that was done, if you want to read that.
Was those district lines drawn using some set of population numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so those are the numbers that were used. So going forward, it would go from those numbers to the next centennial, the next census, which will be in 2020.
Correct.
And then they will use those as a comparison.
Yes.
So we have numbers.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanks.
Yeah, well, no, I was going to say, because Heather and I, Heather was looking for these numbers, and I had seen these numbers previous to me running, because I think my district is somewhere between 25 and 27,000 folks. And I had seen that number somewhere, I just couldn't remember where I saw it, and I don't know when that came up.
It was a 2010 census.
Was that
promise you. That's
two-
what they used.
Right. So, yeah.
The highest number of any district, back when this districting plan was drawn up, all of them were less than 11,300. They were like,
They had to be, because the
Yes.
population was only 50-some
you
thousand.
know, Commissioner Hanks just mentioned, like what, 20?
Well, yeah, it was like, it might have been 22, but I mean, I saw a figure somewhere,
So there have been
to determine that.
major changes.
So I don't know what to say about that. If they used numbers for districting when they came up with the districts in 2011 or 12 or whenever that was, the next census is coming up in 2020. We'll be using those population numbers to redraw these district lines. If you're considering redrawing the lines now prior to 2020 census, that, in my opinion, is absolutely ridiculous.
Commissioner, I think what Madam Mayor, I think what
Yes,
he's trying to say is that, we drew the district lines based off of these numbers, but we didn't watch the growth within the districts.
Yeah.
So if we're going to say we do it by, I had said earlier, we didn't follow the law, and the response was, but we did, we followed the charter, but we didn't follow the state law, which says that when the population increases, we will adjust the district lines. You asked the city manager, are we monitoring these numbers? The answer was yes, but not closely, meaning Yeah, we know that the numbers are there, but we're not watching to see how much they've changed for the point of districting. This isn't what we're doing. So I think what he's asking, what I heard, is are we going to create something that says we will adjust our district lines based off of the population number, not off of the census? Because our charter is not within the state guidelines, but is within the guidelines we wanted.
And that was one of the things that we have to get a consensus on. Did you have your hand up?
Yes. I don't want us chasing rabbits because of what was going on with the county. I mean, there has not been a disparity within our city whatsoever. We do not have single-member districts. There's no reason for us to get our panties in a wad over what we're discussing right now, what the population is within the 5 districts. When the census come back, the census is the only way to accurately get numbers. The only way to do it, to get an estimate at this point in time, is take those accurate numbers and then go to planning and zoning and see how many houses have been built, and then you give an approximate amount of people per household, so you come up with this estimated number. It's a whole lot of work, and why would we trace that during the 10-year cycle anyhow? What's it give us outside of more work to do? You're not going to increase the money coming from the government or the state or the federal, because that's already established through the census. So why are we doing it?
Okay, Commissioner Carrison.
There's more than just the census that can be utilized. First of all, I think that the city's planning department as well as the building department could utilize some of its software programming to keep a spreadsheet of some sort that continuously determines how many COs are put out there, and it'll give you a rough estimate. There's also the Bieber count. There's also several different versions of data that you can accumulate to determine whether there's a 5% difference or a 10% difference, whatever it may be. If we want to make sure that the building department and planning department are on that, making sure that if that software hits a 5-10% difference, or at least there's a way to sort it out between districts, whatever they may be in the future, maybe, then that would be the direction that we need to kind of go with and say, listen, if you see that there is a distinct difference, be it 5 or 10% between the districts, and again, I swear there's software out there, then that's what we need to discuss. But if we're just going to sit here and say we really don't care except for every 10 years, I disagree with that too. Because if there is a serious shift between the east end and the west end and even the northern end and whatever those districts are, I think that they need to be altered, and this is kind of where we got in this position we're in now, be it the county or any other, even the state. You need to do it in an expedient fashion, in a professional fashion, and with the ability to have the correct data to be the inspiration that says it's time to look at it. And that's my opinion.
All right, guys, we're going around and around and around in circles at this point, and it's now about 10 after 12, and we've got a couple of other things to do before we have to break for lunch or either wrap up. So we'll do one more round of comments, and then we're going to get some consensuses going. Commissioner Hanks.
Yeah, no, I think, I don't think that a city can have the growth that we have and not show disparity. I mean, if you look over the last 10 years, you're talking close to doubling in size. I can see us at build out, it's a little harder to move things around and shift things around, but right now at what we had 6.7% growth last year, I think doing something a little more often is necessary for that, to keep it proper.
Did you have something, Commissioner Lynch?
No, I'm good.
Commissioner, Vice Mayor Luke.
We're at large. All 5 of us are at large. We represent all citizens, not one district. So I don't see a disparity. The county commission brought it up over the single-member districts. If we had single-member districts, then maybe I could say, yeah, we have a disparity if the numbers get out of whack. But when if there's 3 sections and you're representing one of those sections, I don't see a disparity because you're representing all peoples. You're just living in that district.
Violating the law,
No,
state law.
state law allows you to, it doesn't mandate it. But still, it is at large. Doesn't matter where you live, you are representing all peoples. So I don't see where this conversation outside of going 3 to 2, 3 districts, 2 at large, is really fruitful.
Mr. Willis?
Your biggest disparity is the fact that when our district lines were drawn, we were in the height of the recession. We had almost half of our homes in our city that were empty. I mean, there was what, a third of the houses in Northport that went into foreclosure and were empty. Our district lines were drawn on that. Not only have we increased in the amount of homes that we've built in the city, but we've refilled those homes from the 2010, 2012 era, where a lot of those homes were sitting empty. And the other thing is I think that you're looking at it from the point of view as a current commissioner and not from those of us that are citizens that want to run to represent our district and our territory that we would fall in with an adequate count. It's not about those of you that are already sitting there. It's about the residents that want to be able to run. So it's got to be looked at it in a different light because no, it doesn't affect you on the account, but it does affect me and my neighborhood based off of that count on whether or not I want to run against you or I want to run against him, or if I have to move districts to be in the district that I want to be in to represent. I understand that we represent at large, but representing the interest that falls within your district, there are some people that do want to have that voice within our community. And those district lines do affect that. I know that within my district, we have more parks than fall into some other parks. So therefore, I may be more focused on those parks because they affect my neighborhood and my territory. I have 2 parks directly in my neighborhood. Commissioner Hanks lives on the east end of town where you have one park that incorporates almost everything into it, and you're not scattered with local neighborhood parks. So his focus may have only be in large conglomerate parks because that's what they're used to in their district. So it does affect us as people who are wanting to run.
Wrong form of government.
You're
Talking about a wrong form of government. The only reason that because of this districting, the only reason that you give your address is because of being a candidate. Has nothing to do with representing a district. Has to do with being a candidate. That's it. After you're elected, you're done with that address. So again, I don't see I'm going to look at your parks, I'm going to look at his parks, I'm going to look at somebody else's manufacturing, I'm going to look at the older section of town, because I represent the city as a commissioner.
Then why do we need districts so people can't live in the same neighborhood?
Because it was voted in by, sir.
But what I'm saying, we did it for the purpose of people not living within the same neighborhood.
I haven't spoke about this yet, so it's my turn. Districting, long time ago, back in 2012, when the citizens approved districting, I voted against it. I firmly believe that you, like Commissioner Luke said, and all of us know, when you are a candidate, you represent the entire city, you have to live in a district because that's what was voted in by the people. That's what candidates do, that's what the districts require. You represent the entire city, you are elected by the entire city. Unfortunately, because the county now has single-member districts, people think that the city has single-member districts, and it's creating this huge educational mess on our hands. I am not in favor of districts. If 3 people want to run and they're from one area of town, that's the way it is. People voted them in. So we have districts. I agree, if we're going to go to 3 districts with 2 at large and the at larges are alternating based on the election year, fantastic. The 3 different areas of the district map are going to have 3 different people, 1 at large, and then the next one will be at large. Population is the way to do it, and I firmly believe it should be done by census. City Attorney, there has been talk about this disparity between Florida state statute and the charter. Could you please help me understand what Florida state statute says versus what our charter says? I know what our charter says, I'm not familiar with Florida state statute. So if you could put it in English.
I'm not as familiar with it either. I'm trying to find it, but I've not been able to look it up. But if our charter is more restrictive, it can be more restrictive than the statute. It just can't be less restrictive than the statute.
So if our charter says we must follow the census, and the state statute says, well, I think we need to have that question answered formally. To be able to know exactly what the state statute says versus what our charter says, before we make any changes to the charter to be able to match up this disparity that I'm hearing exists, but I can't get confirmed. Is that something that you can send to us?
If that's the will of the commission, we can do that.
Yeah, I really think we need
just
to,
move on.
I think we need to have that answered before we talk about this disparity between the Florida state statute and the charter.
It's already written in the charter, the
Right.
5%.
I
don't
think
know
if
what
we're
the-
in violation of state
Yeah.
law, that's our city attorney's office's job to make sure that we're
Gonna
in.
have
in-
another conversation,
within the
have
law.
another conversation, have another conversation.
But if our charter is not matching the state statute, that's what we need to find out. And that's
I
what
guess
I'm
that's
asking
what
the city attorney to find out.
And I guess that's what I'm saying. It's their job to make sure we're within the law. I don't know.
Well, I would think that we wouldn't have redone this charter with anything that goes
You
against
can't
statute.
guarantee that. I mean, you can't guarantee the past, you can guarantee the right now.
Definitely look to see if there's a conflict.
Can we get a consensus to have the city attorney look to see about a conflict?
I think that's his job anyways.
I agree, but
Sure.
Move on, let's go. It's getting late.
all right. So with all of that discussion about the charter, I'm sorry, about districting, at this point in time, city attorney, the only thing you need for the 2020 referendum, not going any further, is to do 3 districts, 2 at large, with the 1 at large alternating election cycles.
I believe that's correct.
Okay, do you need anything else to do this referendum?
Consensus?
We have a consensus on that. We already had that way back at the beginning. Yes, way back at the beginning.
Our head, yes.
Yeah. All right, is there anything else to this matter that we need to discuss? All right, moving on then. The last thing I believe is about what happens if nobody wants to run. But if we're going to go to 3 districts with 2 at large,
I don't think you'll have that issue.
And I think, I mean, doesn't the
It's
state,
already
you know, the state already
addressed.
addresses that where they,
Yeah.
doesn't the governor appoint?
we have a thing in our charter that says about vacant positions. So city attorney, help us out with this part.
So if there is a vacancy, the charter currently says, depending on the type of vacancy, that the governor can appoint a person. However, that's not required by state law. If the commission decided to take that responsibility and appoint somebody, the charter could allow that as well.
Which is kind of what we were doing
Trying to
initially in
avoid.
26, well, but in 2016, we were kind of looking at that when the commission was, well, no, we were, yeah, and we actually were taking a vote on whether to appoint someone. Oh, sorry, I don't get to do that.
Vice Mayor Luke.
I mean, I know this at-large will alleviate some of this, but it may not totally eradicate it. Personally, myself, if there's nobody running in districts 1, you know, at all, then open it up to at-large.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Mr. Duvall.
On this topic, I came up with 3 possible ideas, and believe me, all I'm here for is to learn from you and to give you information based on me being on the Charter Review Board. Okay, but I came up with, you know, if you do go to the 3 and 2 districts at large, someone doesn't run in one of the districts, there's a possibility Maybe you fill the seat with the highest at-large candidate that didn't win, okay, in this district. Or maybe you fill the seat with the highest loser from another district. Or a third thought occurred to me, possibly you have the governor appoint someone into the seat with the commission's input, recommendations from the sitting commission. Those are things.
Mr. Willis?
The charter says that what will happen is if the vacancy is within 9 months of the next election, the governor would appoint. If the vacancy is more than 9 months, we would hold a special election. So what would happen based off of the charter, we would go to qualifying, nobody files, you would have to call a special election for that. One way of doing it is if nobody has filed within 30 days or 15 days of the qualifying date, then the seat could become an at-large seat for that term. That way it's specific, it's to the point, and it's direct to the one item. The worry even with that is now you're opening up to an at-large seat when the voters made it districted. I'm gonna shut my mouth.
I think you'd still have a hole if nobody qualifies. That's the issue that I was looking at. Nobody qualifies for the position, nobody, then what do? Do you ask the governor to appoint, does the commission appoint somebody in that situation?
But based on what he had read, it said that if the election is less than 9 months and nobody qualifies by the June qualification date, it's less than 9 months so to the next election. So the governor would appoint.
That's what the charter says, correct?
So I
So
think,
meaning that if you've hit qualifying, nobody is qualified.
the governor appoints.
No, wrong.
There's no
You would
vacancy
call
at
a
that
special
point.
election because there is no vacancy in that seat.
No,
It's-
it's not vacant until after the election.
So one of the things,
Then it goes 2 years, you're right.
remember back to Jacqueline Moore resigning. When her resignation date was the date of the election instead of the date of
forgot about that.
certifying. So with that being said, the issue that you have is she created a period where there was nobody there before that election. So we could have had an appointment with her particular situation. That's not the norm of how this works. It would be somebody didn't file for office, therefore they didn't qualify, therefore you have a hole. So it's going to be 2 years before the next general election. And that was the conversation that was had during the joint meeting last time. Is it the next general election or the next general election for that district? Because those are two different things. The next general election for that district is 4 years out. The next general election in the city of Northport is 2 years out.
And then you're gonna have to pay for a special election that nobody wanted to run for the seat for to begin with. So it's,
Which I think is crazy. To me, you open it to at-large.
I'm cool with that.
And let the candidate run from another district, but they,
Have no qualifying people, but you still have a hole.
Still have to be a special election,
If any,
pass the qualifying date.
yeah, but if nobody, let's say you do that and still nobody wants to run, nobody wants the job,
That's gonna happen soon.
then what do you do?
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
That either, the charter does not address, so either the commission can choose somebody, or you can ask the governor to appoint somebody, or you can flip a coin.
I think when we, if I may, when we had this deep, depth discussion, it was so that, one, it would be required to appoint, because we did not want to see it sit vacant again for so long, only because that commission at the time did not want to appoint anyone. And we were not very confident that we wanted the commission to appoint, unless it was absolutely necessary. So with those two objectives in mind, how did we not accomplish that goal? And I thought that's exactly kind of one of the reasons why we had such a deep 50 freaking minute,
It was much longer than that.
17 meeting discussion on the charter changes. Like,
I think it was, most likely it was, no one assumed that nobody would run, that nobody would qualify.
no,
We had that
talked about
conversation.
it.
But what it boiled down to, and it's, the majority is still here that voted, we do not want to appoint, we are not okay with appointing. So even having the conversation of you guys appointing is the craziest thing I've ever heard of, because the majority block that
Right.
voted against it is still sitting here. With that being said, do you really want the governor appointing a 4-year commissioner? There's
I
gotta
want the
be.
people to choose.
Right, that we've gotta put in place a stopgap that says, if we do not have, and you can't say if nobody is qualified, or if nobody has filed by the day of qualifying, because then they don't have enough time to file. I mean, how do you've gotta have a time frame. If nobody is filed by X day, this seat would become at large. It's almost the only way without appointment to solve that particular scenario.
But then what happens, and the other part is, if you have nobody that qualifies for any of the election, seats that are up for election, and you have nobody, then what do? You just say, okay, it's gonna be at large? Then you're back to the original question, why have districting?
If you're cool with having the governor appoint for 4 years, then make that your
It sure
fill-in
would get people
situation.
to say, hey, we gotta find somebody.
I'm begging people not to run. If our governor's appointing, I'm becoming friends with the governor and begging people not to
Did you
run.
wanna speak?
Well, I was just gonna say, you can't find an answer to everything you don't know the question to. And I think if a situation like, the city attorney mentioned comes up, well, then you deal with that situation, because you're talking about an extenuating circumstance here. And so what happens is now you know the questions to ask, because you know the situation you're dealing with. And then you can address those directly. But right now, we're just gonna be grabbing at straws at what can be and what might be and what if. So I think we're going too far down the rabbit hole, as Commissioner Luke said.
I tend to agree with everything you just said about that, because you cannot come up with a scenario for everything and put it in the charter. And
Yeah, our charter
There's-
already says something.
there's just really no way to come up with every possible scenario and think of every possible scenario. My imagination isn't that great.
Well, one of the reasons I like the 3 also is it expands the
Correct.
district, so you have more of an opportunity for somebody to throw their hat in.
So do we have a consensus to just leave things as it is with this vacancy, possibly if nobody decides to run, because it is addressed in the charter? There is,
I would say yes to the charter as it is.
yes. Alrighty. I do not see anything else on that list. Is there anything else anybody else sees?
Well, they brought this up.
Oh, we already addressed that. That's already been done at the,
that was
at the,
already done.
when we redid the whole charter. That we changed the citizen initiative from the 1% to a lower percent for citizen initiative. So that part's taken care of.
There is one thing that I'd like to bring up that hasn't been touched on. And when we redid the new charter, we moved the amount of time it took to determine if somebody served a term. It used to state 2 years or more, and it was classified as a term. Less than the 2 years, it was not.
And unfortunately, the voters decided, or whenever it was put forward, the voters decided it was 2 terms, and a term was defined as a day. And that's what the voters voted on, unfortunately.
I didn't know it was defined as a day.
That was based off of the conversation that was had from the commission. It was determined that a service would be defined as a day. And unfortunately, that came from those that wanted it to be 2 terms. I mean, that was the commission before you
matter
guys that
how long it was.
solidified.
Because that was totally different than what was previously done.
Correct.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have anything else that they'd like to address about the charter and charter review?
The only last thing that I had was Commissioner Hanks brought it up, and I don't know if we want to even tackle this at this point in time because of everything else. Council versus commission.
Yes.
I mean, we are actually a council, not a commission. A commission actually oversees. We used to have commissioners because they were over departments and stuff like that, and they actually were a commission or something. We are actually a council. But as I said, I don't know if I want to throw that out on a referendum at this point, when there's so many.
Leave it alone. They were okay in 1950 something when it happened, and it's fine today.
We're commissioners. I think it's kind of understood that we're commissioners. I hear what you're saying, the council and commission. I think that people have gotten used to it, and to change that and put a monkey wrench in it is just gonna make things even more difficult. But let's get consensus. Do we want to have a conversation about changing from commission to council?
No.
I said I didn't want to go into referendum at this point, but at some point I'd like to see the correct term. Because I run into the same thing that Commissioner Hanks, commission of what? What kind of commissioner are you?
Funny. Yeah, 12 years, I've never had that happen.
I've had it
12
at
years.
least a dozen times.
Really?
All the time, even at some of our leagues.
Alrighty, city manager, I know it's workshop, do you have anything? City attorney?
No, ma'am.
Alrighty, it is now 12:27 and we are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Crab. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Nice.